people in China have looked towards the US as a highly developed country for quite a long time now. But clearly, things are shifting on the China side as well. And China's latest stated goal is to become a moderately developed country by 2035, with a per capita GDP reaching the standard of such nations. And I wanted to ask you, what are China's core advantages in achieving this goal? And what might be the most significant challenges, do you think, if China, were to reach its goal?
Great question. The advantages, there's a whole list. I definitely won't be able to remember or list them all based on human limitations. But the big one, in my estimation, is its political system. China's political system, despite receiving all of this hate from the U.S. and the collective West for many, many, many decades, not just in this recent period, but all of this hate tries to paint China as some kind of quote unquote authoritarian regime with absolutely no capacity to involve the people and to give the opportunity to express their desires, their wishes, and their interests to the government for the government then to act on them. And the very opposite actually is true. Not only does China's government have a massively high public trust level in the 80 to some experts in the West, mind you, from the Harvard Kennedy School and elsewhere, it's like 95%, 97% public trust in the government. And that's because China's political system has incredible advantages. On the one hand, it does offer a level of involvement, especially at the village and township level, where people have the ability to voice their concerns, to be involved in how their day to day life is organized and what they need to be able to live a more prosperous and better life. This has been demonstrated in the fact that in 2020 China eliminated extreme poverty, and the poverty alleviation campaign was completely constructed around the notion that Communist Party members had to go to the poorest and most remote areas of the country and involve themselves in that village process, in that organization of people to get involved in solving their own local problems together. And this has led to an absolute miracle where now there is no extreme poverty in China. And now China can focus on, as you said, this goal by 2035 to become a moderately prosperous economy. This is a incredible achievement that will happen, one, because of its political system, and two, because of the path that it took. People in the West have a hard time understanding how important it was for China to pursue opening up and reform when it did. Not only was the so-called world socialist bloc uh, having a hugely difficult time in navigating a very hostile political economy and world system led by the U.S. hegemon, but it was also not guaranteed that a system like socialism that China adopted in 1949 could survive without being fully integrated into the world economy. It's very difficult to survive isolated. We're seeing now in the modern sense, outside of even this question of socialism versus capitalism, we see it, like, for example, with Russia. If Russia didn't have the friends that it did, it wouldn't have been able to survive sanctions. But it does have friends. It does a lot of friends. And China, through opening up and reform, was essentially able to make the entire world economy its biggest friend because of the way that it determined and navigated how it was going to develop and open up and use its own advantages of having a massive labor force and having this huge motivation. Every single person essentially in China, are talking about a billion to now 1.4 billion people all wanting to live better. That can lead to some incredible things, and the world reaped incredible benefits from it, including the West. The West was able to reap the incredible productive capacity of China at a very cheap cost. And then China was able to through its socialist system, through its political advantages, by not allowing itself to become indebted and not giving up its sovereignty, it was able to obtain the knowledge, the information, the technical know-how to then apply the lessons of the modernized world economy toward its own national interests. And that has led to this economic miracle that is currently underway in China. So there is no doubt these are just some of the advantages that China has. The CPC is really the biggest one. It's over 100 million people who are dedicated to the betterment of China. And by having the ability to both one involve the people, like what happens through the political system from the village level all the way to the NPC, all the way up to the two sessions, all the way up to the biggest bodies and events that occur in China that determine policy, to the fact that the CPC also has the ability to consult with the people at the level of a top down. This is
Yeah.
the uniqueness of China. In the United States, there's a fetish with, oh, people get to vote for who they want. In the collective West, they get to vote for one of the candidates that's running, and because they voted and because they supposedly expressed their will through that vote, that means it's a democracy. But what happens after that vote is cast, what happens after that politician is elected, is that politician then works for the people that have paid for their careers and that have made their life comfortable, and who they such essentially resigned all of their loyalty and their interests to, which ends up being rich people. It ends up being oligarchs. It ends up being corporations and banks and the military industrial complex. That uh, that is not a democracy. That is
Yeah.
essentially a dictatorship with electoral features or electoral characteristics. So, a corporate dictatorship with electoral characteristics, I should be clearer
Yes.
on that. So, when it comes to China's system, the ability for the party and for the government to not only say, okay, well, people at the village level and onward can participate in the government, can express their will, and then for the government to say, okay, what do we do about that? We're going to do something about it. We are organized to not just talk and get votes and sit in our positions, but then who are we loyal to? Well, now the government has to do things, and sometimes doing things means, yeah, you don't talk about it, you don't uh you don't necessarily have a massive dialogue about it, it just gets done. And
Yeah.
this is part of China's system that is underestimated, that is demonized. But there needs to be a level of direction. There needs to be a level of leadership taken at the top to be able to act on what people, in society, what ordinary people who are not political figures, who are not in the National People's Congress or at the provincial level, delegates or whatever, people who are just living day to day, working, etc., raising families, if things don't get done for them, then the entire project that China is pursuing falls apart. And the reason it
Mm.
doesn't fall apart is because the government has many mechanisms to just get it done, to build 40,000 kilometers since 2008 of high speed rail, to become the leading producer in renewable energy in a very short time, when just a decade ago, 15 years ago, the cities in China were considered some of the most polluted and difficult to even breathe in. That has changed in
Yeah.
such a rapid amount of time. The poverty situation, and we can go on and on and on. The advantage of having a government that can work incredibly fast to get things done that people want is why there's this high level of public trust, and it's why China will continue to achieve its goals. In terms of challenges, I, I think world war, nuclear war, that to me is the biggest challenge, because for China, I don't think there is a really, the United States at this point. We've seen it in Ukraine. We see it even with Iran. We see it when the U.S. is forced to, or compels itself to, uh, confront a so-called peer competitor or larger adversary, the foes, the bigger players on the world stage of the multipolar world that it really wants to see toppled. That's kind of like the
Mm.
end game for the U.S. It runs into a lot of problems. And the
Yeah.
biggest problem is that, unlike 20, 30 years ago, when the US could, say, use a pretext like terrorism and say, we're going to go around the world and just bomb Iraq, bomb Afghanistan into the Stone Age. That's not happening with Russia. They have
Yeah.
air defense systems. They have a modern military. They have weapons that the U.S. doesn't have at all, hypersonic missiles and the like. Um, China, China has a very advanced military, and both of these countries, with their very advanced militaries, are all advanced in a way and organized in a way to defend themselves. So there's no invading China. The U.S. can't do that. The U.S. can't fly its planes over China and say, yeah, we're going to bomb China into the Stone Age. With the military option completely out in that way, the US has to rely on proxy wars, on sanctions, on other means for now. And those means aren't going to succeed. Taiwan won't become another Ukraine. And if it did, Ukraine is a defeat. And Taiwan, any kind of war over Taiwan or war, with Taiwan being the proxy, or even bringing in other players like the Philippines, anyone else, it's going to end very quickly. The economic situation is going to spiral out of control. China, within minutes to hours, can surround Taiwan and can mobilize its military in a way that will absolutely decimate the entirety of the way the economy works, especially for the United States. That it's almost like karma. It's a complete and utter backfire. The entire
Yeah.
point for the US in militarizing the Asia Pacific is to cut China off from the rest of the world, especially Asia. That's not happening. And the opposite is happening. And China has the ability to, if it had to exact incredible economic pain on the United States. But it won't, because it doesn't want that level of destabilization. It's a huge advantage for it to be able to act in a way that allows it to both pursue its own goals and to focus on specifically its own development, as well as the defensive capacity, the security it needs to continue onward with it. So, in terms of the biggest challenges, it's when and if. I tend to think when, unfortunately, when the US ruling circle realizes that the empire will now be number two or three, even number two in economic size, number two in innovation, number two in technology. And when the world continues on this process of China being the um, primary economic motive force of development and production, when that process cements itself further to a point, um, a lot of US policymakers, especially those within the hawkish military industrial complex and the military circles, are going to have to make a very difficult decision. Do they just drop their entire agenda and say, well, that's kind of it. We're done. The only thing we can do now is be a lesser competitor to a different world? Or does it go out with guns a-blazing? And that means likely the nuclear option, because there really is nothing left. To get to that point, though, needs a massive pretext, needs a massive destabilizing event or series of events that it's really difficult to imagine happening without major consequences. So this is the bind, really. This is the bind that even the challenge that China faces um, runs up against. And that bind is the fact that if your only weapon is to blow it all up, then you truly are in a very bad situation. And so this is where the US empire is. This is the biggest challenge that China will have to face. It isn't to say that the US won't continue to wreak havoc all around the world and try to choke off China by choking off and trying to destroy and manipulate and overthrow or control or find all kinds of ways to destabilize any political situation worldwide that's favorable to China, any trade arrangement. That's already happening. But look at the results. Even that visit, we were talking before we came on here about the meeting in South Korea between Trump and Xi Jinping. Uh, when Trump went to Japan and met the prime minister there, and she was just so happy to see him. She was so just
Thrilled.
deferent, and she was just so, it was like, it was like watching someone. It was like Donald Trump was like had a cheerleader or something.
Yeah.
It was like the athlete with the cheerleader on. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We love
Yeah.
you. We love you. We love you. Even that is even that level of subservience to the United States, which Japan has a long history of since the end of World War II,
Yes.
that can't stop the fact that Japan needs China economically. And with 100 US bases, hell, that meeting, that whole spectacle happened on a US aircraft carrier with Trump. Uh, Despite all of that, Japan can't break off its ties with China.
Yeah.
It can't. If it does, Japan's economy will be even in worse shape than it is now. So, uh, we have talks of a South Korea, Japan, China, almost like a trilateral economic relationship. That's that's that shouldn't happen if the US had the ability to choke off China. And so
Yeah.
we are in an unprecedented moment where China is moving into this position of, I won't say invincibility because there's no such thing, but it's moving into a position of incredible strength, economic strength, the ability to defend itself, a political system that works, that people like, that they trust, and all of that is giving the US's overall agenda of weakening and containing China major headaches, major problems, likely intractable and unsolvable problems, where the real risk is, well, are there people within the ruling circle, if we can call them people? Are there forces within the ruling circle in the United States that are um, destructive enough to take it to the next level? That will be something we will have to keep an eye on as all of this develops.
Wow, Danny. I mean, thank you